Hey there, and welcome or welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you haven't been here before, my name is Emma and I write romance and I'm based in the UK. Today, I was wanting to talk about a book that I read recently and I just think could be really, really useful for writers. I wasn't actually reading it in terms of writing, but I only got a few pages in before I thought there's some good stuff here. And I'm wanting to look at it in terms of both helping with creativity and productivity, which are two things that affect all writers, I think. So the book is this: The Mountain is You, Transforming Self Sabotage into Self Mastery. So, yes, the title is kind of harsh, but it is absolutely right in that it argues that the biggest obstacle in your path to getting whatever it is you want, the mountain, is often yourself. This shows itself in things like unconscious fears, past traumas, limiting beliefs, and our brains hang on to these to protect you from discomfort, failure, and judgment or change while blocking growth. There is so much for writers to take away from this book. So many common struggles like procrastination, perfectionism, writer's block, inconsistent habits, fear of sharing work, imposter syndrome, or endless scrolling instead of writing are classic forms of self sabotage, which so many of us engage in. Procrastination is my big one, along with imposter syndrome. These behaviors aren't laziness or a lack of talent. They're often your brain trying ineffectively, I may add, to create safety, validation, or control. In fact, to stop you from failing. So, how can this book help exactly? Well, The Mountain is You can help you to recognize these patterns so that you can step out of your own way. This will lead to greater creativity with authentic ideas and flow and productivity, ensuring sustainable habits and output. Okay, so breaking down a little of what this little gem of a book advises. So, firstly, it helps you to identify your specific self sabotaging patterns in writing. So, you're going to have to get kind of deep into what is holding you back here. What the writer suggests is that you start by getting brutally clear on exactly what your problems are. She recommends listing everything you are unhappy with in your writing life, such as unfinished manuscripts, not submitting work, avoiding editing, inconsistent daily practice. Then identify the behaviors preventing your progress. So, a practical exercise that there could be for writers is to journal, answering the question, what recurring patterns show up in my writing process? E.g., starting strong and then abandoning project, or over researching without drafting. You can then ask, what purpose is this behavior serving and how is it protecting me? So, for example, procrastination might protect from fear of criticism or the vulnerability of putting imperfect work out into the world. You could also ask, what negative association do I have with success as a writer? Such as successful writers can be judged harshly. If I finish this project, I'll have to face whether it's good enough. Maybe no one will want to read it. This awareness alone can disrupt the cycle that you're stuck in. So, a practice exercise for writers would be to maybe journal an answer to what recurring patterns show up in my writing process. So, things like starting strong and then abandoning projects, over researching without drafting is another example of this. And then you can ask, what need is this behavior serving or protecting? So, procrastination, my big one, might protect from fear of criticism or the vulnerability of putting imperfect work out into the world. Then you can also try to answer, what negative association do I have with success as a writer? This wasn't really something I'd thought of, but successful writers can get judged harshly. For example, if I finish this manuscript, I'll have to face whether it's good enough, whether anyone will want to read it. This awareness alone disrupts the cycle that you're in. Self sabotage often signals that your inner narrative is outdated or that you're resisting positive change. The next step then is to understand the resistance and fear, especially when this happens when things are actually going right. which really does sound bizarre, doesn't it? But resistance frequently appears not when life is hard, but when you're on the verge of thriving, such as during a creative breakthrough or when building momentum. It's fear of the unfamiliar, success, visibility, or fully embodying your creative self. And this feels threatening because it requires letting go of your old identity to some extent. So, for creativity, when ideas feel scary or too big, instead of quitting, try pausing and ask what fear is surfacing. This keeps you in the flow rather than spiraling into self doubt. Releasing old stories and beliefs frees up mental space for original, authentic work. For the productivity side of things, recognize that discomfort is part of climbing the mountain. Your new life, in a way, is going to cost you your old one. This might mean releasing the identity of the struggling writer who waits and waits for inspiration and stepping into the disciplined one who shows up daily. Then we move on to building emotional intelligence and acting independently of feelings. Big one. A major theme here is learning to disconnect action from fleeting emotions that come across us. You don't need to feel motivated to write. You need to build the skill of doing it anyway. This strengthens mental and emotional resilience, which is crucial for handling the hard things that writers have to face, like rejection letters, bad reviews, creative droughts, or the vulnerability of publishing. You want to develop a writing routine which is rooted in self trust rather than fleeting inspiration. Track progress by positive actions, so words written, time at desk, healthy habits completed, instead of perfection or external outcomes such as the number of reviews you get or the number of copies of books that are sold. When intrusive thoughts hit, like this is absolute rubbish, no one will read this, remember that intrusive thoughts are fear based and head centered. True intuition, which is what we're after, feels grounded. Ignore the noise and keep going, is the advice of this book. And I love that. We want to process emotions productively so they fuel your work rather than blocking it. Many writers channel feelings into stories. Better emotional literacy makes that process richer and less overwhelming to go through. Now, the final step is to align with your future self and release the past. Vision and act as the writer that you want to be. What would the productive, creative version of you do today? I bet that they wouldn't be scrolling on TikTok for 3 hours. Small, consistent steps are what compound and lead us to success. So, exercises here would be reflection. In what ways am I different than I was 5 years ago? What have I overcome? This builds evidence of your resilience to yourself. If I fully believed I was capable and deserving, you could ask, what writing choices would I make differently? So, finishing drafts, sharing work with more people to get feedback, setting bigger goals, making sure that they're achievable, of course. Practice self compassion, of course, when you slip. Imperfection is required for growth. Growth happens through obstacles and mess ups, not through flawless execution. So, the overall impact on creativity and productivity that we're going for is that by addressing the root internal mountain, instead of just forcing external tactics like rigid schedules or productivity apps that will eventually fail, you create sustainable change. You're actually making a change within yourself. Creativity deepens because you're no longer fighting yourself. You access your full inner world without your old fears censoring it. And productivity, therefore, improves because habits become aligned with your needs and your future vision rather than willpower battles. The author of this book emphasizes that everything you need is already inside you. The work is excavating it and refining it. So many readers will use this book alongside daily journaling, and there are companion workbooks, which I believe are also available, which have lots more reflective questions if you want more structured support. What I would advise is definitely reading or rereading The Mountain Issue with a notebook handy and treat it as active work rather than passive reading. You'll just get so much more out of it that way. Writers who apply its principles often report breaking long standing writing blocks, finishing way more projects, and showing up more consistently for themselves because they finally understand why they are getting in their own way, and they're able to unlock the creativity and productivity that they knew deep down that they were completely capable of. So I guess you can now all see how powerful this book can be. It's quite a tough read, obviously, because you are having to be extremely honest with yourself. So my only other recommendation is to take it slowly, not just to try to read the whole thing in one day, working through the questions and thinking through everything that's brought up, because it will just be too much. Definitely break it down into small chunks and do it over a longer period. Well, thank you so much for joining me for this video today. I really hope that you enjoyed it and that it was useful. If you haven't already, please remember to boop that like button and subscribe if you're not, because we have a lot of fun on this channel, and I will catch you in the next one.